everyone. Today's talk, or what I'm going to be talking about today, is entitled Teaching to Empower: How to Support Junior Engineers. So, just to start, I'll give you a little bit of background or a story about myself. So, for 2 years, my first 2 years as a software developer, I did some awesome things, right? I built impactful features, I worked to improve the code base at my company, and I helped to manage and mentor a few interns. And although I did all of these really cool stuff, I still spent the first 2 years of my career as a developer feeling very embarrassed, under pressure, incompetent, very anxious, and like I wanted to quit. I was like, I am not good at this job. I'm not making an impact. I'm not doing well at all. But I figured, that's the way it's supposed to be when you're an early career developer. So what I just have to do to like fix those feelings is just to produce more work. So I would like stay up late and like try to finish my work early so I can keep up with the more experienced developers at my company. I was like, maybe I'm not smart enough and I need to try to get a little bit smarter. And as someone who came from a coding boot camp, I thought maybe people with bachelor's degrees are smarter. So I enrolled in college to pursue a degree in computer science. And I was constantly trying to prove myself and my worth to myself and my coworkers. And I took on like big, high priority, risky projects to do that. The crazy or weird thing looking back is I didn't recognize any of the awesome work I did. I didn't take time to acknowledge any of my progress. I had felt like I hadn't grown, but looking back, I grew so much within those first 2 years. And after talking to people, other junior developers, other early career developers, I realized this is not an isolated experience. Um, Other people were feeling the same way or had that same experience. And a lot of those people I talked to decided to just quit tech altogether. But I started to have a bit of a perspective shift. Um, and this happened when I started teaching people to code. I also observed my husband's developer team. He actually started to code at the same time as me. We went to the same coding boot camp, and I was like, he's not having the same experience. So I was just observing or eavesdropping on how they were treating him. And I also worked at a different company afterwards, and that all helped to change my perspective on the experience of an early career developer. And I just want to put this tweet out here. I saw it and I thought it was awesome and amazing for any early career developers who are listening in. It says, don't get it twisted. While you may be able to survive in a toxic environment, you cannot thrive in a toxic environment. And I realized that to be true for myself. So by changing my environment, my confidence increased a little bit. I got a little bit of a better work-life balance and some more peace. It's still a work in progress for me. And I gained a more realistic awareness of my strengths and weaknesses. So I was no longer like, man, I am terrible at everything. I was more like, okay, this is something I'm good at, and this is something I'm not so good at, but there's opportunity for improvement here. And I also developed a passion for empowering junior engineers and helping them to grow. Like through my experience, I started feeling like, okay, you know what? I can actually help people to feel the empowerment that I wished I had when I was more early in my career. So, of course, I'd like to share those tips with you today. But before I do want to introduce myself. My name is Rizel Scarlett. I'm a developer advocate at GitHub. I was a full stack engineer, a little bit more focused on front end for about 3 years. I am the director of programming at G Code House, which is an organization that introduces women of color and non-binary people of color to code. I'm also passionate about empowering and educating others, especially about technical topics, and I have a passion for learning and an addiction to Twitter. So, on that note, please follow me if you want. If you want to see more content or chat with me or anything, I'm definitely friendly at Black Girl Bites on Twitter, #nodev.2, GitHub, and practically any social media that you can think of. Okay, so I want to start with this, that every developer is a teacher. And you might be like, I don't know if that's really true, but I really do think it is. Whether it's an explicit responsibility, like if you like founded a coding boot camp, or you teach at a coding boot camp, or you mentor there, or you teach at a school, or you're in developer relations, you're a teacher, right? That's like written out in your job description. But it's also an implicit responsibility. If you're an engineering manager or a senior dev or a mid-level developer, your job is to teach or nurture junior developers. And even if you're a junior developer, you're still going to find yourself in a situation where you're supporting a developer with less experience, whether it's an intern, whether you go mentor somewhere. Every developer is a teacher, and I think we need to be more aware of that. So maybe some people are agreeing, yeah, I'm a teacher. I do teach people how to do things, but are you empowering others as you teach? Whether it's your peer who's on the same level as you, or someone who's in a level below you, or whatever, are you empowering those people as you teach? So I've gone through observations and experiences where I've learned how to better empower people as I teach. And the first observation is just observing my husband's experience. Like I mentioned, he learned to code at the same time as me, and we went to the same coding boot camp. So our skill sets are pretty similar. But his work experience was so much different than mine. So I was always like eavesdropping, especially during the pandemic, to see like what made his experience so much different than mine. And I think one thing is that if his mentors, listen to him, right? And that's my advice to y'all. Listen as much as you speak. Oftentimes when we're mentoring people, we're like so excited to share all of our knowledge, but that can be very overwhelming to the junior developer, and it's also ignoring what their true needs are. So we need to sit down to listen and figure out what they want and need. Like, what are their goals? What do they want to become? They're not exactly you, right? Also, support should be available. I think a lot of times where I had a bad experience is that I didn't know who to go to for help, or people looked very, very busy with their own work. So I believe that we should assign designated mentors who actually want to answer questions and can prioritize helping new developers. I think one way of solving that is by holding office hours, so that a developer can feel safe asking questions. Because I know a lot of times one of the problems is we're waiting for the new developer to reach out to us, or we're not sure if we're bothering them too much. So setting times where you're like, this is a time where we're going to answer questions for you is very helpful. And then also setting clear goals and expectations, right? Most times junior developers don't want to be junior forever, right? So they want to know what milestones they can reach so they don't feel stagnant. Make those clear so they know what to strive for. I think for me as a junior developer, I was kind of like, I'm a junior developer, but how do I not be one? And no one was really giving me that advice. So I think it's really good to help them set those clear goals and expectations. All right, cool. Next is G Code. That's another experience that helped me learn how to empower junior engineers. So basically, at G Code, we teach women of color and non-binary people of color how to code. I developed the curriculum, I ran the program, and I mentored 15 women of color. Each cohort. So we're on our fourth cohort now. And the top thing I learned is vulnerability. So tech to me is rooted heavily in like elitism and academia. So we often feel like we have to pretend to know it all, even if we don't. Like we'll try to like pull up some kind of BS answer to say like, yeah, we know what you're talking about. But oftentimes with more junior developers, I think it's great to be honest. Even without junior developers, it's just generally great to be honest and say you don't know everything, because that reduces the pressure that new developers have um to feel that they have to know it all, right? Like you can just say I don't know, and that would make them feel more comfortable saying they don't know as well. Also, don't ask if they've Googled it. That is such a common question from senior developers, or even like just anybody a little bit over one level over you. Did you Google it? Of course they did. That the reason they're reaching out is because they need help and they've already Googled it. It's already been an issue for them to swallow their pride and even ask for help. And I understand why people ask if you've Googled it already. It's to try to develop that research muscle in you. But I think a better way of doing that, that's not so condescending, is practicing this framework with them, asking them, what's your goal? What have you already tried? And what did the results look like? That way you all reach to the answer a little bit faster, and eventually they'll come to you with that before you even ask. If they notice every time you're asking, what's your goal? What have you tried? What did those results look like? Then they'll already know. I'm just gonna ping them and answer those questions ahead of time. And then also understanding teaching style versus learning style. I think oftentimes we have a tendency to be like, this is how I learned it, so this is how I'm going to teach it to you. But that's not the way that everyone learns just because that's how you learn. So you have to learn to adapt to their learning preferences and provide options that are best for them. Also, if you're more in the formal teaching realm, spaced repetition is good, and that is a method of reviewing material at systematic intervals, because our brains can't store every single thing at once. So I know some people use Anki cards and a program called 100 Devs. For G Code, I use Kahoot quizzes, and where I'll like repeat a question that we had from week 1, even though we're on week 6. And then also gathering feedback. This is an important part of listening more than you speak, which is what I mentioned earlier, right? You want to get an understanding of, does the junior developer feel like they're following the path that they want to follow? Are they getting to reach their goals? Get a better understanding of the junior developer and get a better understanding of how they feel and what you can do to make improvements for them. And then also gradually increase responsibility. I think it's great to like challenge people a little bit, but don't just throw them in the deep end. Maybe have them do a little here, a little there, and then be like, oh, cool, because you did this, let's amp it up a little bit and you can do a little bit more. Let them get that information little by little. That way they'll feel accomplished, but they'll still feel challenged. Also, I started to follow some other thought leaders who are great at thinking about how to empower people or how to empower engineers. Leon Noel is one. He runs a program called 100 Devs. There's also April Wenzel. She does compassionate coding. And there's also Becca, who is a maintainer for virtualcoffee.io. Okay, another experience that really helped me understand how to empower junior software engineer was just me switching jobs. When I switched and worked in an environment that was much better for me, I was like, wow, this is exactly what I would have preferred earlier on in my career. So one of the things that my manager did with me is he had me reflect between tasks. So after completing a ticket, I wrote a blog post. I think it's great for new developers to take that time to either write a blog post or just notes about what they learned and maybe like present it to the team or something like that. Because I think it helps with retaining what you learn. Oftentimes in engineering, we're moving from ticket to ticket to ticket. There's always going to be new tickets. I think it's good to help with pacing yourself. Also, giving empathetic code reviews. I suggest or I advise that you be thoughtful when providing feedback and code reviews. Take your time to read the code and provide advice that they can use. And let them know when some suggestions are huge blockers versus nitpicks. Like if it's a nitpick, be like, okay, just remember this for next time, but this wouldn't block the release of your feature or your bug fix or whatever it is. And just be kind overall in it. I think sometimes when people are just like very harsh, it can be very discouraging to just see all your hard work be harshly criticized. So I think there's a method to go about it, to be kind, but also constructive. And then in handling mistakes, I advise people to avoid placing blame and help the developer fix the issue if they indicate that they need help. Right? Let them know it's okay. You already made that mistakes before, and give them tips on how to not make that mistake in the future. I think placing blame can be very common in the tech industry, but it's normally leadership's fault if someone makes a mistake, because or the team, right? Because there weren't guardrails in place for that new developer to not make that mistake. Here is an example. HBO Max in the summer of 2021 had sent out this empty test email, and everybody on Twitter was like ranting and raving about it. They're like, this is hilarious. I bet it was the intern, da da da. And then on Twitter, HBO Max tweeted out, yes, it was the intern and we're helping them. although it was kind of funny, I wasn't a big fan of that, because I think that was kind of putting that blame on the intern, whereas they should have just taken responsibility and said it was us. So here's my quick advice for companies, engineering leaders, and hiring managers. Start thinking about your culture, right? And within your company's culture, within the team's culture, you should be giving positive reinforcement to all the developers, but especially early career developers. People are more likely to perform well when they know they're doing well. If you're like, you're doing so good at this, they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to keep going, I'm going to keep trying hard. And genuinely highlight achievements they've made, even if it's small to you. I think that's so important. Sometimes we might be like, oh, I've done that before, but make them feel good about it because that's the first time they've done it. And then in hiring is so important to your company's culture, to your team's culture, and to the growth of a junior developer. There's a tendency to ignore arrogant developers because they're intelligent and we know they'll make a big impact at our company. But it's better to hire developers who are more humble and who would advocate for mistreated members of the team, because as your team lifts each other up, they'll continue to grow together rather than having one developer pull them down. I think that's going to be the opposite of productive. And then start thinking about process. I think Scrum and Kanban are really great because they help to encourage developers to complete tickets, but it also has a con because there's a focus on completing tickets rather than helping each other out. So I think there's room for us in our industry to think of methods where we could prioritize helping each other, rather than just going from ticket to ticket to ticket, because we feel like helping somebody is going to slow down our productivity and make us have like a bad review in the future. And then also write clear tickets and documentation so you can work so people can work confidently. That is like the simplest thing to do in my opinion. Writing a clear, concise ticket and documentation can really help a newer developer feel confident picking up a ticket and working on it. And that is all I have. Thank you for listening in and continue to make the world a better place for early career developers.